Hey guys, it's Danny. Alrighty, today we're going to discuss about a type of orchid that I really like. Now, I'm not referring to a species of orchids or a genus or a variety because, and here's the good part, many orchids can look like this. Now, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, well, don't you notice something kind of interesting with this orchid? Yep, the color of the leaves and these very light colored stripe patterns on the leaves. We call this a variegation. In cultivation, there are quite a few variegated orchids. It just so happens that I don't have a lot of them, although I really like them, but they're not very common. It is not a rare trait, to be fully honest, and I think you can discover variegated orchids at orchid nurseries, even in the shops if you're lucky, so it's not something super rare, but definitely it is uncommon, and I for one have never seen variegated orchids in the stores or even in nurseries all that often. But let's talk a little bit about what is this variegation and what causes it, and also touch base with some concerns regarding variegated orchids. Now, first of all, the orchid that I have here is an Arachnus orchid, and this is a hybrid. This is the Arachnus Maggie-owie. I'm hoping this is how it's pronounced. I do have another Arachnus, and I'll show it to you on the screen right now, but as you can see, it is not a variegated orchid. It has clean green leaves. So, as you might suspect, variegation refers to a light-colored or discolored pattern on the leaves that should normally be green. Variegated leaves can present light colored stripes, but they can also be purple or even a different shade of green. And on the screen right now you are seeing my Vanilla planifolia, which is a variegated variety, but as you can see, the contrast between the stripes and the actual leaf, the green leaf, is not so pronounced. It doesn't mean it's not variegated. Also, we can find a version of this exact plant without variegated leaves, and also we can find this plant with a much striking variegation in which those stripes are pretty similar to the Arachnus that I just showed you. So there is a bit of variety, and as you might suspect, the most sought after variations are the ones that contrast the most, and the Arachnus is the perfect example of that. So variegation can occur in multiple types of orchids. Searching on the internet for information, I saw Cattleyas that are variegated, even Vandas, and of course even Phalaenopsis orchids. One of the most popular variegated orchids is the mini Phalaenopsis Soka Vivian, which I actually have, but I don't have the variegated version. Now, the variegation only refers to the leaf pattern. It doesn't reflect on the flowers, or at least as far as I know, it doesn't. Variegation is a mutation, and this is what makes it so uncommon. And because it is a special type of mutation, propagating it is yet again a bit difficult. If we pollinate the flowers of this orchid with the flowers of another orchid, there is absolutely no guarantee that we will obtain another variegated cross. So the best way to multiply these orchids is by cloning. Now, in cultivation, the Arachnus, the Phalaenopsis, Cattleyas or Vandas, they're not the most popular variegated orchids. There is one which pretty much rules them all and is very expensive, and this is the Neophoenicia, formerly known Neophoenicia and currently known Vanda falcata. The Vanda falcata is a miniature orchid which is very popular in cultivation. However, the version that we most probably find for very low prices is the typical general Neophoenicia falcata, which does not have any type of striping or variegation on the leaves. It is pure green. Well, in cultivation and especially in Asia, there are multiple strains or varieties of Neophoenicias which have so many variegated patterns. It is unbelievable. Now, I don't own one for myself, sadly, but I will link you down below to a video with a seminar performed by a person who is specialized in Neophoenicias and who has traveled a lot and has seen a lot of them. And of course, you will see there some pictures. I think it's a really interesting discussion for you to see. Check the description down below, and there you will see the different types of variations which are more popular than others and so on. Now, the interesting thing is that this variegation doesn't always translate to the keikis, or actually the offshoots that this orchid produces. We can have a variegated Neophoenicia which will produce a totally green offspring. So if you are interested in knowing more about the subject, you do have at least something to start off with in the description. Now, variegation rarely occurs in nature. However, it does occur quite a lot in cultivation because of the mutations we can obtain when hybridizing orchids. At the same time, we can propagate it with tissue culture, practically cloning the orchids. However, there is another way to make an orchid turn out variegated, and this is to provoke the mutation. How can we provoke the mutation? Inoculation with a virus. Viruses can determine break of color and certain visual modifications that have to do with the pigment. They can modify flowers, but they can modify leaves as well. And there has been some concern, at least in people's discussion, about virused orchids. And in my research, I did find an account of an orchid enthusiast testing his variegated Phalaenopsis and finding it was infested with both the Oncidium ring spot virus and the Cymbidium mosaic virus. At the same time, though, there are accounts of people testing their variegated orchids, not necessarily Phalaenopsis, and discovering no virus at all. So for this reason, I cannot say if certain orchids have been inoculated or not. There is a high possibility they have been, yes. And this is purely my suspicion. I suspect Phalaenopsis are more likely because they are a more popular orchid and more widely spread, more known, therefore it has more chances to be purchased. Inoculating a virus into an arachnus, I'm not sure what the outcome of that would be. Since this is an orchid for enthusiasts or collectors, it is not intended for the general masses that are not necessarily enthusiastic about orchids. At the same time, the whole culture with the Neo-Phoenicia is not based on virus inoculation. Propagation and preservation of that variegation is a very old custom. So at least with Neo-Phoenicias and Arachnus and other orchids which are not very well known, I personally don't believe we are dealing with a virus. In the case of Phalaenopsis, on the other hand, there is a suspicion. I tend to believe there might be some truth to it, but the only way to know is to purchase yourself a test kit. The only ones that I know of on the market are the Agdia test kits, and I do have an entire video about it. Agdia did send me some test kits. I did perform some tests. You have a link here in an info card and in the description below, so you'll see more about it. But I'm presuming there are some other brands on the market as well. You can also have in your country or region a laboratory which can perform a test for you. If you are concerned that you might have a virused variegated orchid, definitely you can test it out. That is the only way to know. At the same time, if you don't want to test it, just follow the simple hygiene rules. Try to maintain the orchid at a safe distance from the other orchids. Don't splash water around, don't use the same cutting tools without sterilizing them. Try to not have pest infestations that can carry viruses and so on. So pretty much, viruses are not a very easy thing to transmit. It's not like a fungal disease. Fungi produce spores, which can spread through air. Viruses don't. They usually spread through sap. And since the orchid oozes sap, it's a great idea not to splash water that can distribute the sap. So keep in mind, viruses can be transmitted with sap and everything related to sap that comes in contact and is absorbed by another plant. It does not spread through wind. Viruses can be transmitted through flowers as well, since they do have sap and any part that contains sap, so that's why you should be careful with. However, if you do want to keep that orchid, maybe you can keep it in a different room, or just be careful with it. You don't need to toss it out, because you cannot know if the variegation is indeed produced by a virus or it's just a mutation. At the same time, try to pay attention at the flowers. A sign of virus is streaking coloration on the flowers as well. So you don't need to have variegated flowers, just the foliage. And the bottom line is that variegated orchids can give you such a beautiful display even if an orchid is not in bloom. So let's say you get a seedling of this orchid, which is a vendacious orchid and grows pretty slow. You do have a beautiful plant in your growing space to look at. You don't necessarily need the flowers. I personally am a sucker for mottled leaves, variegated leaves. I love contrast, I have to say, and this orchid is absolutely stunning. I will be looking into more variegated orchids, but since they're not so common, I don't think anybody can have a super vast collection of variegated orchids. But who knows, we'll see what happens in the future. So let me just give you a close-up as we end this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this. And if you didn't know variegated orchids exist, there you go. Another thing to look out for when you're purchasing orchids and you would like to have something like this. And you know the drill. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for regular orchids and plants videos. And also don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Bye! By the way, look who's gonna bloom again. Yeah, it's the massacred Dendrobium. His canes plumped up quite a lot, And even though this cane is not really looking all that spectacular being the first cane, it does produce a few buds here and there. So goodness, you guys, I noticed on the market it is becoming very popular, this Bigibum dendrobium variety compactum, or hybrids of it. It is such a vigorous grower. If you see it at a very good price, you like the look of it, but you're not entirely sure how to grow it or if it's hardy or not, it is spectacular. I think it's one of the easiest orchids you can grow, together with the Berriota actually. I really hope that in the autumn and again in the spring we're gonna see more varieties with this, because I think soon enough it will become a crowd favorite really.